Good morning, everyone. This is your girl, Jasmine D. Felder, and welcome to the Brand of Jasmine D podcast, where we discuss the modern day woman, her lifestyle, her career, parenting, dating, purpose, alignment with God, and more. On this episode today, I wanted to talk about the subject of retained for success. So, as we get ready to close out the year of 2022 and we prepare to transition and step greatly into 2023, I wanted to point out how the grass is not always greener on the other side. How sometimes we have to take a step back before we can move forward. I always say that before we can catapult into being the best version of ourselves, because that's what we are here to do. We are here to figure out our purpose. We are here to align with what God has for us. But before we can become the best version of ourselves, we have to go through those trials and tribulations, those hard times. And I personally know how those hard times, they don't feel good. Trials, tribulation, bad times, they don't feel good at all. But actually, that is what actually makes us. Mud, getting dirty, the hard times, the discomfort, that is actually what makes us. Because if we think about it, if everything went perfect all of the time, we would not be willing to really get down, get dirty, and figure it out. Having to figure it out, having to get down and get in the mud and get dirty, that's what brings out our full creative selves. That's what helps us go to the drawing board and figure out, why is this not working? What can I do to be the best? How can I make another form of income? What is something that can give me another stream of income? You know, when you lose your job, when you're heartbroken, when you break up with someone, when you're demoted, when you are held back, that's when you actually have to figure out, okay, let me realize first that what I'm doing is not working. And now let me go to the drawing board and figure it out. That's when you put in those hours of research. You're on YouTube. You're on Google, you're researching, you're listening to podcasts. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's nothing wrong with enjoying yourself and having a social life. But when something is not working, you go to the drawing board and you say, okay, let me figure this out. When you're broke and you can't pay anyone to pay to create a flyer for you, that's when you say, let me figure out how to create a flyer for myself. You go to Microsoft Office, you go to Canva, you go to whatever creative source that you use to figure out, how can I get this done? Because I only have $15 in my pocket. So I can't go to Etsy. I can't go to Fiverr. I can't pay anyone to create this flyer. I have to figure out how to do it myself. A year ago, I always saw myself as creative. But a year ago, I never would have trusted myself to make a thank you card or a business card or a flyer. Now, I do all of that and I create party favors and I do whatever I need to do, because sometimes, no, not actually, sometimes, all of the time, you are the source. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't outsource help, because understandably so, when you first start a business, it's just you. And maybe you have someone you consider your one employee. But most of the time, when you start a business, it is just you. Now, months to years later, you will probably have other members and other employees where, yes, rightfully so, you can outsource help. You can now afford to outsource additional help and get people to pay, or pay people to, create things for you. But when you're just starting, it is a wise move to be so 10 toes down in your business and say, hey, I have to know what's going on. I have to be able to know how to do this, so that no one never knows how to do your business more than you. But my point with saying all of that is, when you don't have access or the funds or the connections, you have to be the connections. You have to be the resources. You have to figure out what it is that you need, and you have to do the research. You have to take the time to get it done. Will it be perfect? It never will. But will it be how you want on day one? No. But by day 10, you'll be figuring something out. By day 50, you'll be having your own plan together. And I'm just calling out days, but by day 137, now you have a plan and you can execute. So today, I really wanted to talk about retained for success. And if you don't know, I am an educator. I've been an educator 5.5 years now. I've taught secondary, I've taught post secondary, I'm now teaching elementary. So I've kind of taught various levels of education. And no matter what level I have taught, I have realized that we all have to sometimes be retained, quote unquote, retained to be successful. Now, if we talk about it from an educational standpoint, of course, you know, at each grade level, from pre-K all the way to 12th grade, you're either going to be promoted to the next grade level or you're going to be retained. Promoted, of course, you're going to the next grade level. You've satisfied all requirements on that level to now be promoted to the next level. Retained, of course, means that in some way, shape, or form, you did not satisfy all requirements of that grade level. So you are being retained, you are being held back, and you will have to repeat that grade level the next year. So I have often seen a lot of parents, and it seems weird when you say it out loud, but I know a lot of parents have requested that their children sometimes be retained to be successful the next year. And retained does not mean that a person does not understand. It does not mean that a person is inadequate. It does not mean that a person is unable. Sometimes retained is not just academically. Sometimes retained is due to social factors, environmental factors. Maybe for whatever reason, a child does not know how to behave adequately. Maybe a child does not know how to interact socially at a certain or an expected level, so they're retained. So a lot of times parents request that their children are retained to ensure that they meet the expectations and the requirements the way they should. Because a lot of times we know, and not just in education, but just in many factors in life, sometimes we move ahead before we actually are ready. Sometimes we are granted access to certain levels before we are ready. And while it seems beneficial at the time, it actually has an adverse reaction. If you are promoted to a level before you are ready, you do more harm to yourself than actually benefiting yourself. So from an educational standpoint, yes, again, parents can sometimes request that their children are retained to ensure that the next year they get all the fundamental factors that they need, making sure that academically they understand all of the content and all of the standards, making sure academically that they have the knowledge that they need to ensure that all of those prerequisites are met. Making sure that once they go to the next grade, they understand and they're not trying to catch up. They're not being met with a particular topic and they don't have the foundational requirements. So, of course, they can ask to be retained to make sure academically they are together. Making sure that socially they are together, because especially in this current time, we know that the pandemic has, while it has had benefits, it's had pros, it's also had cons. And one of the cons that I know from the pandemic is a lot of people have suffered socially. A lot of people no longer know how to interact. And it's not just due to the pandemic, honestly. Some of this is due to social media. A lot of us, we interact with a lot of people socially, whether that's FaceTime or whether that's through texting, whether that's through different social media platforms, whether that's through different platforms like Microsoft Teams or Zoom, and all of these just other various social, technical, just platforms where we can talk to people over the phone, over a computer, a laptop, iPad, whatever the case may be. So, socially, a lot of people are challenged because they don't know how to interact face to face. A lot of people lack the ability to, you know, hold eye contact. A lot of people lack the ability to be able to talk face to face without, you know, moving or just being very antsy. So that's another reason that someone could be retained. But my whole point in saying this is, from an educational standpoint, yeah, students can be retained for success. And the same thing goes with us in life. We can be retained for our success. And I think, especially as adults, it hurts us more when we're retained, because we start to feel as if that's a blow. That's something is wrong with us. That's failure. And I always say, and my mom has always told me this saying, and I don't know where she heard it, but I definitely give credit to whoever definitely is the originator, but I definitely heard it from my mom: delayed is not denied. Not getting the job, being demoted, being picked over, not being accepted into the school, the various just different scenarios and situations that could be, a lot of times we're held back for a moment so that God can work on us internally. Because one thing, when we look at different positions, like whether it's a supervisor, whether it's a promotion, to be in charge of someone, you know, God knows when we're ready and when we're not ready for different things. He knows internally maybe our attitude or our patience is not where it needs to be. Because in order for you to lead a team, you have to be able to have certain characteristics like empathy. You have to be sympathetic. You have to be understanding. You have to be patient. Of course, you have to have knowledge over whatever type of skill that you're teaching and that you're in charge over. If you're trying to go to school, there's certain things that you need to be able to have the time to focus. You need to be able to have a team, and you need to be able to have a village. You need to be able to have the patience and time to write that paper. Otherwise, you could fail out. You know, so definitely being retained is only temporary. It's only for a moment. And I think some of us get so caught up and never wanted to be retained, never wanted to sit still, never wanting to take a step back, that we can never take a step forward. And the problem with that is some of us are so content with being still that we don't realize being still is just what it is. Being still, never moving, never advancing. It's great that you're in a wonderful position, but there always has to be some form of growth. You can't, or you should not, let me say, you should never stay in the same place for too long. There should always be growth. And sometimes growth is funny. Sometimes growth appears to look like a decrease, but it's actually an increase. You know, maybe you were demoted. Could be. But that demotion allowed you to sit next to someone who you will start to have conversations with. And internally, you're starting to grow. That person turned into kind of like a mentor to you. So when the next time that position comes around, your mentality is different. Your responses are different. How you hold conversations are different, solely because you were demoted for a second, or you were held back for a second, or you did not get that promotion, and you were able to meet someone who helped you evolve by simply challenging your thoughts and your opinions and helping you realize there was more in you. Sometimes being retained looks like a heartbreak. But with that heartbreak, you now have time to figure out who you are. You're no longer being held back by a person who was envious of you. You're no longer being held back by a person who was jealous of you, a person who had insecurities surrounding you. So now you don't have to worry about coming home and, you know, maybe cooking dinner. I don't know. I'm just throwing out scenarios there. But now you have time to do the research. Now you have time to say, wow, I can create this podcast. I can create this YouTube channel. I can create this blog. I can, you know, do hair. I can do nails. And you don't have anyone pouring negative thoughts into you, telling you you can't do that. You don't know anyone who does that. That's not realistic. It hurts for a second, but now you realize that that person was actually bringing you down. Retain sometimes it looks like it's like I said, it's a momentary, temporary feeling of loss. But what it does is it's like a catapult. You're pulled back, and in that moment of being pulled back, everything that needs to be poured in, well, first off, everything that needs to be poured out of you is poured out. So all of those bad thoughts, all of those insecurities, all of those second thoughts, all of those just bad mindset thoughts are being poured out of you. And sometimes that takes time, because you have to think about it. As long as it took for those negative thoughts and opinions to pour into you, it's going to take double or triple the time to get it out of you, because you have to do the self-healing. In my previous episode, I talked about scars versus scares. All of those past scars, all of that past trauma is going to have to get poured out of you. And then you're going to have to start pouring into yourself. And retained for success is, yes, being pulled back for a moment. Having to sit still for a moment. Having to figure out, who are you? What is the entire purpose of your being? Where does God want you to go? That's being in alignment with God, talking to God, asking God the hard questions. And it is, unfortunately, it's not always a quick answer. It's not always the thought just pops in your mind. You have to do the work. You have to take the time. You have to ask the hard questions. Who am I? What am I here to do? What is my purpose? Retained for success is that temporary moment of having to sit still. And one thing I know is sitting still can be hard, because we're wired to move and we're wired to just jump at the first thing. And that's why we see a lot of times people in business, they jump into a business and maybe it doesn't work. And then they say, you know, I've done hair, I've done nails, I've sold shirts, I've done this. And that's okay. Because, hey, process of elimination. I'm never going to say, effort will always put you where you need to be. As long as you're aligned with God, you know, there's nothing wrong with trying something. Even if you fail, it's okay. Because, I mean, now you know what not to do in that particular area. I believe I heard the founder and creator of Canva had a previous business before that failed and went bankrupt, or that did not do well at all. And it was kind of like taking a chance on Canva. But now look at Canva. Canva is that go-to for many of us creators. There's so much that you can do on Canva. But just think about it. If the founder and creator would have said or allowed the thoughts and opinions of other people to say, hey, you just had a business that failed and that did not do well, where would they be? So you also have to check your circle. You have to check the people that you have around you, because we all, I would say, are one bad thought or opinion away from giving up. So you have to be careful of who you allow into your circle. Close the circle. Close it and make it very tight knit, because as creators, we have a lot of things that run through our mind. I will wake up at 3 a.m. and I use my phone, like my notepad on my phone, because I'm not getting up at 3 a.m. and finding paper and pencil. But I will get up if a thought runs through my mind, and I have to write it down, because you got to think about it. There's so much that's trying to impact you on a daily basis. if I'm in the car, I know. But if I have to pull over or something, or I have to say, hey Siri, set this reminder, that is what I'm going to do. Because as creators, we have a lot of thoughts, we have a lot of ideas that will come into our minds. And so we have to make sure that we are pouring the right things into ourselves. We have to make sure we have that encouragement. One thing that I do every morning is when I get up, I pray, and I get dressed, I get my daughter ready, and I'm playing inspiration all the while that I'm getting ready for work or getting ready for my day. I have to fill my cup before I walk out of my house, because the one thing I know is as soon as probably even before I walk out of the house, there are several things that are trying to grasp my attention. There are several things that are trying to take away from me. So I have to make sure I'm filling my cup. I have to make sure that I'm adding to myself. And that's the thing about being retained for success. I know there are some things this year that it seems like it pulled you back, and it seems like it tried to stop you. But if you stop and think for a second, those things, all of those things are coming together to work for your good. It's like a cake. You don't sit and just eat a raw egg. You don't sit and just eat butter. At least I hope not. But you don't just sit and eat a raw egg. You don't just sit and eat butter. Most of us don't just sit and eat sugar. We don't just sit and eat vanilla extract, or we don't just sit and eat, what else makes a cake? Flour. But when you put all of those things together, they form the cake that you love. All of those things individually might not taste well. All of those things individually are not fulfilling to you. But when you put all of those things together, they make the best cake. They make the best tasting cake ever. And that's the same thing with life. All of these little trials individually are horrible. They taste like crap. They feel like crap. They possibly even hurt. But when you put all of those trials together, all of those no's together, when you put all of those not right nows together, when you put all of those denials together, when you put all of those pink letters and red letters and yellow letters together, when you put all of those emails together that make you feel like you're not good enough, when you put all of those heartbreaks together, when you put all of those betrayals together, they come together and they produce a bomb behind woman or man. When you put all of those things together, it creates the best CEO. When you put all of those things together, it creates the biggest and baddest boss. When you put all of those things together, it produces the biggest and best decision the world has yet to see. Individually, they hurt, but together, they are coming to bring out the best version of you. And that is what I need us to realize. Retained for success is the biggest and the baddest blessing you could ever encounter. You are retained, you are held back, but only for a moment. You can only be held back for a moment. It can only hurt, but for so long. It can only be a bad situation for so long. Eventually, because there is a eventually with a capital E, eventually all of those bad things have to subside. They have to move to the side. You have to be waiting and you have to be ready. That's why you have to do the research now. That's why you have to stay up late now. That's why you have to study now. That's why you have to keep putting in the applications. That's why you have to stay faithful. That's why you have to have the mentor. That's why you have to go to counseling. That's why you have to fill your cup. And that's why you have to get the inspiration. That's why you have to get rid of all of the bad people. That's why you have to get rid of all of the naysayers. Because when it is time to step into your destiny, when it is time, you have to be ready. When that yes comes, they don't have time for you to say, hold on, I have to get my mind right. When the bank calls, they don't have time for you to say, hold on, I have to open the business account. When, the person calls to say, hey, I heard, and that's why you have to be careful, because a lot of times when you're retained for success, you never know who is watching you. You got sent to another job. You got sent to another department. You got sent to another school. You lost your job and was told to go over here. You lost the who you thought was the person of your dream, and now you met a person who is like, I don't know if they're for me. But you have to be careful, because God brings everyone into your life for a reason. Some are a season, but some people are totally a reason, and it could be a forever reason. And you never know who is the right person to drop your name in a room. You never know who is the right person to speak on your behalf. So you have to be careful how you treat people. You have to be careful how you handle people, because you never know the power someone holds. Everyone does not hold their power on their skin. Everyone does not hold their power on their sleeve. Some people are walking around with the biggest favor of God. Some people are walking around with the biggest names that do not hold a big blue check, but they have the biggest access and they have the biggest resources. So you have to be careful how you handle people. You have to handle people with care, and you have to be ready. You have to do the work now, because when your time comes, and it is coming, but when your time comes, you have to be ready. Do not let an opportunity jump over you. Do not lose the opportunity because you were playing in the time when you should have been sowing. There is a harvest time coming, but you have to sow now. You've sown the tears, do the work. Because after you have sown, you have to do the work. Faith without works is dead. So if you don't do the work, you can have all the belief you want, but if you do not do the work, you do not study, you do not do the research, you do not network, you don't take the time to do what you need to do, it's going to pass over. So don't be a person who, misses a blessing solely because you are focused on the retained part. You're retained for a moment, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, everyone who has been retained, they still meet their destiny. They still get to where they're supposed to go right on time. So it's okay that you were retained. We all have been retained, if we're to be honest. I don't care how glitz and glamorous they try to make it seem. We all have been retained for a moment. So it doesn't matter that you've been retained. What matters is you use that time of being retained for what it's supposed to be. As I said earlier, get the counseling, get the mentor, do the research, take the time, keep building and building so that you can be the best version of yourself. Own who you are, and you can only own who you are when you find out who you really are. So, thank you all so much for listening. As I said earlier, as we get ready to transition from 2022 to 2023, it's time to do the work. We have sown. Now it's time to do the work, because once you sow that seed, you have to water that seed. You have to keep watering it. That's the only way that it's going to grow. Water and sunlight. So keep doing the work. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope and pray that you all have a Merry Christmas. I hope that you all have enjoyed your holidays and continue to enjoy your holidays. And as we get ready to prepare for a new year, it's really time to do the work. It's time to become the best version of ourselves. So thank you all so much for listening. This is your girl, Jasmine D. Felder, and this is the Brand of Jasmine D. Podcast.